There's a moment that keeps repeating in our era. You open your phone, and there it is again. Another war, another necessary strike, another defensive operation, another last resort. And you feel something strange in your chest. Not just sadness, not just anger, but a quiet confusion. Because part of you wants to believe there's a clear reason, a clean story, a moral line. And another part of you whispers, are we being told the whole truth? Is this really the only way? Who benefits when ordinary people pay the price? Today, we're not here to pick sides or shout opinions. We're going to slow down, look at what war does to human beings, look at how the story of war is built, and ask, gently but honestly, what might be hidden behind the words necessary? When I say war, I'm not just talking about battles on maps. I'm talking about the human reality that follows. The mother who sleeps lightly because explosions taught her body that silence is not safe. The soldier who comes home but doesn't fully come back inside. The child who learns a new language in a new country while still dreaming in fear. The person far away who watches footage and feels powerless, numb, guilty, and overwhelmed. If you felt emotionally exhausted by war headlines, that doesn't mean you're weak. It might mean your mind is trying to hold something too heavy without a place to put it. And here's the difficult truth. War isn't rare right now. According to the UCDP conflict dataset, 2024 had 61 active state-based armed conflicts, the highest recorded since the mid-1940s. And 11 of those reached war intensity, 1,000+ battle-related deaths in a year. And even by conservative counting, about 129,000 people were killed in state-based conflict violence in 2024, after a spike that reached about 237,000 in 2022. But numbers can mislead too, because most datasets count direct violence, bombs, bullets, shelling. They often exclude the deaths that come later: hunger, disease, untreated injuries, collapsed hospitals, polluted water. In some conflicts, researchers estimate indirect deaths can be many times higher than direct deaths. So if you feel like the world keeps saying this is necessary, while your body keeps whispering this is unbearable, that makes sense. And maybe the deeper question isn't only why do they fight? Maybe it's also, how do they make it feel acceptable? Imagine someone like you. It's late. The house is quiet. The light from the screen is the only thing moving in the room. You scroll past a video. Rubble, smoke, people shouting in a language you don't know, yet somehow you understand everything. A headline says, necessary response. Another says, unprovoked aggression. Another says, humanitarian intervention. Another says, defending freedom. Another says, protecting our people. And something inside you tightens, because the phrases feel familiar. Not the facts, the phrases. It's like you've heard the same emotional script before, just with different names and flags. Then, the next day, someone at work says, well, war is horrible, but sometimes it's necessary. And you notice your reaction. You want to agree because you don't want to sound naive, but you also don't want to surrender your conscience. So you say nothing. Later, you realize the silence wasn't neutrality. It was uncertainty. It was the feeling that the public story might be simpler than the private reality. And this is usually where we either distract ourselves or we become cynical. But what if we stayed here a little longer and looked more closely at what's actually happening? 3 key ideas, or mental shifts. 1. War often begins long before the first shot, inside fear, mistrust, and miscalculation. A lot of people think war starts because someone is evil and someone is good. Sometimes there is clear cruelty, but political science also points to something more uncomfortable: Wars can start even when both sides would prefer not to pay the cost, because they don't trust each other and they don't believe promises will hold. One framework calls it a security dilemma. When there's no global referee, countries arm themselves for defense, and the other side reads it as preparation to attack. It's like two people in a dark room, both afraid, both reaching for something sharp, just in case. Another framework is even more human, bluffing and misreading. Like poker, except the chips are lives. If each side hides what it truly wants, exaggerates what it can do, and assumes the other will back down, you get a collision. So the first shift is this. War isn't always inevitable, but it becomes more likely when fear replaces curiosity and when power replaces honesty. And that matters for you because it means wars aren't only about weapons. They're also about stories, trust, and perception. 2. The public story of war is often built to be repeatable, not necessarily to be fully revealing. If leaders said, "We want influence, we want bargaining power, we want to weaken a rival, we want to control strategic terrain or resources," most people would resist. So many wars are presented in moral language: imminent threat, defense of values, humanitarian duty, protecting civilians, stopping evil. And here's where it gets real. History has documented cases where public justifications and private intentions diverged, not as a conspiracy theory, as a matter of record in official inquiries and declassified documents. Sometimes the gap comes from mission creep. A limited promise turns into a bigger goal after troops are committed. Sometimes it comes from selective intelligence, simplified narratives, or political incentives. And if you want one chilling example of how powerful messaging can be, a pre-registered experiment in Russia, conducted before the 2022 invasion, found that support for war could jump from single digits to around 40 to 48% after exposure to one threat-based propaganda vignette, especially when paired with a leader's endorsement. Just one story, one framing, one push on the fear button. So the second shift is this. Don't confuse the moral language of war with the full reality of war. Moral language can be sincere, but it can also be useful. And if you feel uncomfortable with that, good. That discomfort might be your conscience refusing to be managed. 3. The cost of war is not only death, it's the long-term damage to human nervous systems. Even if you never hear a bomb, war can still enter your body. Because humans are wired for empathy, for mirror neurons, for imagining pain. But for people in war zones, it becomes a lifetime imprint. Meta-analyses and systematic reviews between 2015 and 2025 repeatedly find that in war-affected populations, estimated prevalence rates often fall around PTSD 23 to 51%, depression 22 to 36%, anxiety 14 to 40%. And many studies show high overlap. People don't just have PTSD or depression, they often carry both. Which means when someone says war is necessary, they may be talking about strategy, but what they are spending is human life and human minds. And even our casualty numbers can hide civilians in plain sight. Some civilians are counted as battle-related deaths when they die in bombardments or crossfire because the event is coded as part of combat even when the people killed were not fighters. So the third shift is this. War's damage isn't only what it destroys today, it's what it rewires for decades.
So, what do we do with all of this, without collapsing into helplessness or hatred? Here are a few small, realistic practices, not miracles, just ways to stay human. 1. Practice a 10-second pause before you share war content. Ask yourself, is this confirmed? Is this meant to inform, or to inflame? What emotion is it trying to activate in me? Fear, rage, pride, disgust? You're not just protecting truth, you're protecting your own nervous system from manipulation. 2. Ask one quiet question that disrupts propaganda. What would change my mind? This isn't about being neutral, it's about being honest. If nothing could change your mind, you're not thinking, you're belonging. And war loves blind belonging. 3. Separate compassion from certainty. You can grieve civilians without pretending you understand every strategic layer. You can care without turning into a judge. Sometimes the most mature sentence is, "I don't know enough yet, but I refuse to stop caring." 4. Keep your circle human. If war conversations in your life become tribal, try this experiment. Ask one person, what part of this hurts you the most? Not who's right. Often, the quickest path away from propaganda is not debate, it's empathy. A gentle note, this video isn't therapy or professional advice. If war content brings up deep anxiety, trauma, or despair for you, it might be important to talk with a mental health professional you trust. You don't have to do all of this. Even one small step, repeated gently, can begin to shift something over time. Let's bring this back to your own life. Not the world stage, not the leaders, not the headlines. You. Where do you feel the pull to accept a simple story because the truth feels too complex or too painful? When you hear necessary, what part of you relaxes and what part of you resists? And what would it mean to become a person who is harder to manipulate but still soft enough to care? If you feel comfortable, share in the comments what part of this video resonated most with you. Your story might quietly help someone else. And if someone came to your mind while you were watching, maybe this is a video they need too. If you'd like more quiet spaces to think about life and grow at your own pace, you're welcome to stay. Subscribe to Reflect and Rise, and let's keep walking this path together. You don't have to rise loudly, you just have to keep rising.